Hola y bienvenidos. In today's lesson, we're going to be talking about tricky word associations between English and Spanish. Oftentimes in English, we can have one word that means many different things and is used in many different ways. In Spanish, sometimes that one word, all those different meanings, we won't have just one word for them, we'll have different words for them. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The first example is the word country. Now, we all know the word country can refer to a region of land where people live, for example, Spain, France, the United States, Mexico. So there's that country, and then there's the other country, like I live in the country on a farm. In English, we use country for both, but in Spanish, the first would be país, the second is campo. Another example is a game. In Spanish, we have separate words for a game as in like a board game that you would play versus a game as in an athletic event. For a board game, we use juego. For a game as in an athletic event, we use partido. The next tricky word is right. We have right as in I'm going to take a right turn. You have your legal rights, and then right as in correct. If you're talking about right as in the direction, it's derecha. A legal right is a derecho. And then to be right or be correct, of course you can use correcto, or you can use the tener phrase, tener razón. Little. We have a different word for little as in small versus little as in a little bit. So if you want to say something is small, you use pequeño. If you want to say a little bit, you use poco. Or if it's a very tiny little bit, you can use poquito. People. We have two different words for people in Spanish, personas and gente. The easiest way to tell the difference between these two words is that personas would refer to a specific group of people where you could identify exactly who the people are and how many there are. Those would be personas. Gente is a singular noun referring to the people as a group. For example, the people of Mexico or the people of the United States. That would be gente, which is considered singular, whereas personas is plural. When we're referring to time, we have the actual time as in what time is it, and then we also have time as in the first time that someone did something, as in like an occurrence. So if you're talking about the time, we use tiempo or hora. So el tiempo can mean the time. It can also mean weather, which is kind of another way this is a tricky word. And if I wanted to say what time is it, ¿qué hora es? If I'm saying that someone is doing something for the first time, I would say la primera vez. With verbs, it's often very important that you are specific in saying exactly what it is that you mean to say. The most common example is between ser and estar. In English, we have to be, so the conjugations am, is, are, was, were, been. Those are all forms of to be, and it doesn't matter if it's a permanent or a changing condition. In Spanish, it does matter. So here's a reminder of that Dr. Place acronym that we've used to study and practice when to use ser versus when to use estar. Another verb that can be tricky is to go. The most common way to say to go is ir, but you're also probably familiar with the verb salir, which means specifically to go out, or the reflexive verb irse, which means to go away. We also have verbs like subir, to go up, or bajar, to go down. You probably remember there are two different words in Spanish for to know. We have conocer and saber. A good way to differentiate between these two is that conocer is usually talking about to know or be familiar with a person, whereas saber is to know a fact or how to do something. For to ask, we have the simple verb for to ask a question, but then we have a different verb for to ask for something or to order something. So if you're asking a question, you use preguntar. If you're ordering or asking for something, kind of like a request, you would use pedir. We have two verbs for to play. The first is to play a musical instrument, which you probably remember as tocar, and then to play a game or sport, we use jugar. To return, if you are physically returning, as in to come back, we use a different verb than if you want to return an item because you don't like it. So to physically return or come back yourself, you use volver, whereas if you're returning an item or something, you use devolver. We also have the verb regresar for to return, which can kind of be used in a variety of instances. So if you're ever in doubt, you can use regresar and you're probably safe. Appear, we have to appear as in physically to show up. And we also have to appear as in like to seem or to look, like she appears to be bored. So aparecer is when something physically appears or shows up, whereas parecer is used when someone appears or looks or seems a certain way. When it comes to spending, we have a different verb for to spend money than we use for to spend time. Spending money, we use gastar, whereas to spend time, we use pasar, which is the same verb for to pass or to happen. For to take, most commonly we can use the verb tomar, which is to take, like to take classes or take medicine. It can also mean to drink, but we also have the verb sacar, to take out, and then we have to take as in like to take someone or something somewhere, which kind of means like to transport. And when you're using that one, you want to use the verb llevar, which you probably know as the verb for to wear or to carry, but keep in mind it can also mean to transport someone or something. To get is probably the most complicated verb of them all. Most of you are used to using the verb obtener, which literally means like to obtain, to get something, or conseguir. These are fairly interchangeable. But there are a lot of other ways we use the verb get in English, and in Spanish you can't just use obtener and conseguir with all of them. Now I'm not going to go through each of these verbs individually, but all of these verbs in Spanish are specific to what it is that someone is getting. So the first one, aburrirse, to get bored, acostumbrarse, to get used to, alejarse, to get away. Some of the others you might recognize are like llegar, which you know is to arrive, can mean to get there. We have to get mad, to get ready, to get as in like to receive, to get on or to put on, to get as in to understand, to get married, to get tired, to get calm, to get quiet. There's a lot of different ways that we use get in English that aren't, it's just not the same in Spanish. You have to be more specific. Otras palabras confundidas, some other words that can be kind of confusing. Most of you know the difference between ellos and ellas. They both mean they, but ellos is referring to they when they are males or a mixed group. Ellas is when they are females. Sometimes people forget that you can do the same with nosotros. If we are all females, we use nosotras. And if I'm in Spain talking to a group of people, you use vosotros for y'all, but if y'all happen to be all females, you use vosotras. Aquí and acá both mean here. Likewise, allí and allá both mean there. The easiest way to know when to use which of these, aquí and allí, you would use if the object or whatever it is you're talking about is close enough that you can point to it and you can physically see it. Acá and allá are a little bit more general. So for example, if I wanted to say the pencil is here and I'm pointing to it, I would use aquí. But if I wanted to say here in Kansas, well, that's a little more general, so I would use acá. Same with allí and allá. The pencil right there, allí, or there, over there in Mexico, I would use allá. Ese, esa, esos, and esas, as you know, these words mean that and those can sometimes be confused with aquel, aquella, aquellos, and aquellas. Similar to the aquí, acá, allí, allá thing, ese, esa, esos, and esas mean that and those if they are close enough that you can see them or maybe point to them. Maybe not quite touch them, because then you would probably use this and these instead of that and those. But if they're far away, like I'm talking about those mountains over there in Colorado, that's when you would use the Q ones, the weird ones, aquel, aquella, aquellos, and aquellas. And then, of course, we have por and para. By now you've learned that por and para both mean for, but they can mean a lot of different things too. I like to use the acronym I'm attracted more to perfecto to help me remember. And I'm just going to go through these really quickly. You can feel free to add them to your notes, or you might already have them too. So the uses of por, you can use por for idiomatic expressions, such as por ejemplo, por ahora, por cierto, por eso, por favor, por fin, por lo general, por lo menos, por primera vez, por supuesto, por último. You also use por for when you're talking about motion or movement around, through, along, or by something. Used for apology and emotion. It's used when you're expressing thanks or gratitude for something. It's also used when talking about transportation or communication as far as the means of doing something. It can be used when you're discussing the reason or cause of something. Por is also used when discussing an amount of time, specifically for or during. Por is used when discussing cost or value. It's used for talking about a time frame or frequency. Por is used when you're discussing exchanges or substitutions. It's also used when you're discussing dispositions or moods. Por is used in multiplication. It's used when you're saying something is happening on behalf of or in favor of. It's also used for rate or measurement. So in this case, por can mean per or by. And lastly, por is used when you're talking about errands. Para is not used in quite as many instances, so I use the word perfecto to help me remember when to use para. We use para when we're talking about the purpose. Also, we use it for expectations and goals. When we're talking about a specific recipient, it is for someone. We also use para when talking about future dates and deadlines, as well as employment and comparing and contrasting. Para is also used when it can mean towards, when it's talking about a destination. Para can also be used when discussing someone's opinion. Okay, I hope this helps to clarify some of the tricky words and some of the confusion that you might have when speaking, reading, writing, and listening to Spanish.